I'm Mary Lyons, the Wealth Woman.
And I'm Eric Alexander with Acorn Grove.
Welcome to the Wealth and Income Podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about some financial advice that a dear friend of mine asked me if she should follow.
Yes.
And I was completely taken aback, if I can be totally candid, completely honest, all those things. So I went to a happy hour recently with some friends of mine, and one of my girlfriends told me that she had been having a conversation with one of her peers in a corporate environment who shared with her that his financial advisor had recommended that he could retire as long as he had 8 times his current income saved up in an investment account.
Right.
And
Which
so
is
this podcast
terrifying.
Right? Okay. Thank you. It's not just me. Now, I know some people are listening being like, what's wrong with that? My advisor told me that. Or they're wondering, is that doable from that perspective? And so this episode is going to explore, can you actually retire on 8 times your current income? What does the math say?
Well, and so we used basically $100K income just to kind of keep it boring and straight. So if you make $1 million, just multiply by 10. Yeah, you're good to go. So we did that on $100,000 and kind of worked through some of the math. And it was fascinating to see. It's like, well, but it sounds good. Like on its face, it's like, okay, 8 times more my income. That seems like more than enough until you do the math. And it's like, that is terrible. It's terrible.
Right.
And so we even gave them the benefit of the doubt. And so we added in Social Security as part of the number. Like, well, maybe they're factoring in Social Security and you don't need the full income replacement.
So let's start with the basic math here. So if I make $100,000, this particular person's advisor told him
the strategy
that he could basically retire as long as he had $800,000 sitting in an investment account. So just to do the math, and we did a little prep work on this, and now that I'm saying this out loud, I don't think we actually did this. But right off the bat, if I am withdrawing $100,000 a year from $800,000, what's the withdrawal percentage?
It's like 12.5%.
12.5%?
If you just do straight away. Yeah.
So 12.5% of your assets every year. And you may be thinking, well, the market has averaged 10, so I'm just dipping in at 2.5%, and that should be fine. And I think part of the danger with these types of assumptions is that we want to oversimplify how the money actually works. Like we're just doing basic math and assuming constant rates of return. And so that's not what really happens. And we're going to get into that more a little bit later. But you mentioned we gave them the benefit of the doubt and said, okay, Social Security, we're gonna take that in. So if they're making $100,000, what's the max right now for Social Security contributions? 178?
Yeah, 176.1. So $176,000 is kind of the max income on that side.
That would be the max contribution into the system to get the max contribution out of the system.
Right. And then at full retirement age, if you're making $176,000, you're putting it all in. At retirement age, your income every month would be around $4,000. $4,018 is the technical number.
The max payout.
Right. So over a year's time, that's $48,000 that you'd get to spend. But our model has the guy making, or the girl or the family making $100,000. And so if you kind of do that rough ratio, it's about a 57 to 60% difference, right? 100,000 is about 57% of 176. So the equivalent of the Social Security would only be around $2,300 a month.
Okay.
So 2282 is the number that we had, is the technical number. So times 12, that's 27,380.
Okay. So we basically need somewhere between $72,000, $73,000 a year of income
from some other
source of a portfolio.
Correct.
Okay. Right. So on 800,000, if I am withdrawing that 72,000 a year, then I'm what, around 9% pull rate?
Yeah, 9.1, somewhere in that range.
So I'm going to start by talking about the way our industry stress tests what you can spend during retirement. So
Right.
if you've listened to previous episodes, you probably know what a Monte Carlo simulation is because we talk about them a fair amount. But if you're listening for the very first time, I'm going to explain it in what I hope is an entertaining way. So if you can imagine for just a moment watching somebody draw the lottery, there's a big glass cage and it has ping pong balls in it. And all those ping pong balls have numbers on them. And some beautiful woman usually pushes a button, a ping pong ball comes out, she reads the number and then sets it down on a little stand. And if the lottery has 6 numbers, then she draws 6 ping pong balls and puts them out onto the stand.
Right.
So the reason I'm talking about this is we're going to use that same concept to explain a Monte Carlo simulation. What we're going to do is just do a quick Google search and we're going to look for the history of the stock market. We're going to say it's the S&P 500 from inception through the end of last year. That's more than 100 years of market history. And what we're going to do is for every year the stock market was in existence, we're going to rate the rate of return for that year on a ping pong ball and put it into our machine. So 100 ping pong balls, all with different rates of return, are puppet around in this machine. And then I get to be the beautiful woman in this example. Don't worry, Eric, I won't make it be you. So I will push the button and out come 35 ping pong balls. And the reason that I am having 35 ping pong balls come out is because if I'm retiring at 65, 35 ping pong balls will get me all the way to age 100. And the reason I'm not stopping at 80, which is pretty close to life expectancy, is because half the population lives beyond that. And I have to plan for life potential. So we're going to go at least to age 100. So that's 35 ping pong balls. For the sake of argument, it is all beautiful. It is a bunch of high rates of returns. There are no losses. We are very excited. We map that out. Then we take all the ping pong balls and we put them back into the machine, let them reintegrate, re-randomize. And then I'm going to push the button again and I get 35 ping pong balls. Do I get the same 35 ping pong balls in the same order, or do I get a different sequence?
You do not, because it is randomized. That's the whole point.
If you get the same sequence, you need to go buy a lottery ticket right away. Something weird is happening in the universe. So if you do that hundreds of thousands of times, you can map out every possible sequence of return that could have occurred in the market. And then you can shove all that data into a computer, because I'm not doing that math by hand, but you can shove it all into a computer and you can say, if I was drawing 10%, what is the likelihood I would make it to age 100 with money in my portfolio? And if that number is 1%, that means in 1% of all market combinations, you can take income all the way till you're 100 years old. And the other 99% of the time, you went broke at some point during your retirement. That is the Monte Carlo simulation. So it is just measuring, using all the past performance, what is the likelihood that you would have made it through with money in your pocket until the day you graduate from the planet. All right. So I'm going to do this. Oh, go ahead.
And I think there's something really, really key there that you said. And I think it's the failure with most people doing Monte Carlos the traditional way. Because Monte Carlo simulations or stochastic modeling has been around for a long time. It's like we didn't invent this idea. And the problem is most of them take up to age 80 or 82 or 3. They go to life expectancy. And they say, well, we randomized it. We pulled all the numbers out. And some high percentage of the time, some 89% number, 90% number, some high number that you're like, well, I'll take those odds. It always works out. The problem is that the moment, and you said something really important there, when you go to life potential, not life expectancy, the numbers change. And I think it's a fundamental gap in how they do stochastic modeling. Monte Carlo simulations is they're going to life expectancy because they're looking at the average of the population. But as somebody that you and I both know, talking about long-term care is not an average situation. It's either 100% or zero.
Right.
I either get some sort of Alzheimer's, dementia disease, and I need long-term care, or I don't. But for that person, it's either 100% or zero. And it's the same as retirement. If I run out of birthdays at 90, but I ran out of money at 80, that is a 100% failure rate. Right? And so if I'm looking at a larger population, 80% of the time it always works out. But for me, it's either 0 or 100.
Right.
And so I've got to make it all the way to the end, life potential, not expectancy.
Well, I think the other thing that is a really important point here, speaking of things that get missed a lot of the times, is that this is a Monte Carlo simulation is not about preserving the principle of your portfolio.
Correct.
It is just measuring whether the balance is positive or not. And so you could have doubled or tripled what was in your portfolio, or you could have $1 left. And we don't know. We just know it's a positive balance. And if it's not a positive balance, you ran out of money at some point. But I don't know if that happened when you were 67 years old or if you made it to 97 years old. I just know you went broke at some point in time because we're taking a snapshot on a particular year and we're just asking, is there money in there or not? What percentage of the time? So we're looking for probabilities. I think, so I had this moment, I'm just going to go on this tangent because I don't know. I'm pretty sure
Because
I'm
we can.
ADHD. The tangent is this. What if we did a Monte Carlo simulation that measured randomizing the sequence of returns, but then randomizing the age that the money had to last? Then, like, it's really random at that point, and who the heck knows what you're going to get? But it sounds stupid when you say it out loud, and yet that's really what we're trying to predict. What
Right.
sequence are you going to get, and how long are you going to live, and who the heck knows any of this? And so the real
Well,
answer,
and who controls either of them is the other question.
not me.
I don't control how long I live. I mean, I have a vote in the activity, but not much. And I don't get a vote the market. If I controlled the market, I would own a mountain somewhere. I mean,
You wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
I would, as much as I like you, I wouldn't be doing this
You'd be
podcast
puppet
today.
mastering all of it.
That's right.
Okay, so, back on track. If you're still with us, thank you. Thank you for your patience during this particular episode. But here's what I think is key. If you are looking at an 8% withdrawal rate, remember we've randomized the returns. So some years are great, some years are not. But if we just go from age 65 to age 80, so we're looking 15 years into retirement, right at life expectancy. The failure rate, if you're withdrawing 8% a year, is almost 40%. Meaning that in almost 40% of possible market combinations, if you're looking at like a 50-50 portfolio and you're trying to give yourself 3% raises to keep up with inflation, and you're paying a money manager 1.5 to do everything, the failure rate is almost 40%, which means and I think it's so easy to be like, 1% success rate, like the odds are in my favor, but we're not playing blackjack where you're making a bunch of different bets with the dealer.
Right.
It's like getting on an airplane and having the pilot say, there's a 40% chance I'm going to crash this plane and you're going to die. Do you stay on that plane?
But 60%, I'm not.
Yeah, have fun. Enjoy your vacation. I'm getting on a plane tomorrow. This is great. Okay, so if you extend it though, like for me, that's not a plane I want to ride on. Maybe someone does. But if I extend it so that it's 25 years in, so I retired at 65 and now I'm 90 years old, the failure rate is almost 90%.
Right.
So only in the very best 10% of market scenarios do I have any money in my portfolio at 90 if I'm taking 8% a year, which means it's even worse if I was actually taking the 9% pull rate that's being modeled.
Right. Well, and I think the other component that's really important there is the fear factor that kicks in and we start making really dumb choices is if you're really on that ride and you're getting close to the end and you see more birthdays in front of you, but not much more dollars, you don't keep making really, really rational choices. You're like, man, we got to go to Vegas. Papa needs a pair of shoes. We need to, like, how do I get more rate of return? And the likelihood of success, just because of the human in the system, starts to go up because you start making kind of really, really outsized bets to make it
Well,
work.
I think even beyond that, there's such a thing as cognitive decline as you start aging,
Correct.
especially if you're in your 80s and 90s, is when you really start to see a lot of that showing up in obvious ways. And so I think that's a dangerous place to be too. And by that point, there's no do-overs. You can't go back and change it. And I think sometimes people say, well, I just won't spend as much money. But if you need medical care, the cost is the cost.
Correct.
So there are things outside of our control. And just to kind of, kick a dead horse, because I'm from Texas and that's a thing that we say when you're beating a point over and over again. If you're looking 35 years out, so we're going all the way to age 100 now, only in the best 2% of market scenarios do you still have money at age 100, which means that you're running out of money in almost all of these scenarios.
Unless you're just amazing, just truly amazing.
Completely, and it has nothing to do with you. You just get lucky is the real answer.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, like, if I was in the 2% range for like an ailment of some sort, like, being super nauseous for the entirety of my pregnancy, I'll get that one, but not not the perfect market sequence. That's
Not the
the market.
positive end of it.
Right. So, okay. So Eric, so clearly 8-9% pull rates don't make sense. And this is the part that's really scary to me, is that that particular gentleman is like a C-suite executive, and he's clearly working with a firm that either his company has paid for or he has paid to work with, and that's the advice he's getting. I think sometimes we hear like big names, or, we pay somebody to help us with something and we just assume this person knows what they're doing because they have a title or a designation or a certification. But then they just say this. And I'll be honest with you, I think this is a situation where a financial professional, in air quotes, is just saying to the other person, here's an answer because it's attainable for you in the situation that you're in, and I don't want to get fired.
Yeah.
Because what other
1000%.
motivation would you have for giving advice like this, knowing these failure rates?
Well, but I don't think I think there's two problems. One is our inclination as humans to have the all you need is X solution. Like, I need something simple. I need something bite-sized. I need something, a pill I can take. I think we as humans want the simplest form of the answer we can get. And I think it's sometimes you would get some of the people that are just like, well, this is what they'll tolerate, so this is what I'm going to go give them. Mm-hmm. Or they didn't really do the math and they got their information through what I call tribal knowledge. The guy that taught me, I'm taking advice from that guy, and the guy that taught him, I'm taking the advice from that guy. And I haven't done the deeper analysis on what this really means. Mm-hmm. Well, it could have been that 3 guys ago you got taught, or 2 guys ago that you got taught by, they had pensions and they had 4Ks and they had Social Security and they had all the structure behind that. And so 8 times your income made total sense in that environment. Mm-hmm. But maybe you don't have a pension anymore. Maybe you're worried about Social Security actually being there. Well, that same advice is getting trotted out, but you don't understand the implications of what that is. And you don't have the intellectual curiosity to go, I wonder if this still works.
So I just did some quick math while you were talking, because I just wanted to see what the answer was. And so I just pulled up a random future value calculator. And I put in that I was starting with $800,000, and then I wanted the money to last for 30 years. And then I took $72,000 a year out of the account. And if I earn 8.2, I never run out of money. But I have to earn 8.2 every year.
Well, doesn't the market give you 10% every year for the ever
Yeah,
and
so
ever and
even
ever?
if I net out some advisor fees, I should be fine, right? This is oversimplification at its worst. Because what we're saying is, I'm getting this very predictable return every single year, and then I'm basically eating my portfolio down to zero, assuming that I have a guaranteed 8.2 coming in every year. But I also know if this gentleman went back to his advisor and said, guarantee me an 8.2% rate of return every year, that the advisor would never in a million years do that.
We can't do that. The market changes. You know that.
Yeah, it's up and down. Well, why not? What would you be willing to guarantee? And it is a totally different number.
Right. So the next question is, if extra income is not enough, then how much should you actually be saving? Like, what's the number?
So if we go back to Monte Carlo simulations, which is arguably the safest way to figure out what you can spend when your returns are not guaranteed. And I want to go back to why what I just said doesn't work. The 800 getting 8.2 every single year. What happens when you retire? If you have $800,000 and you go through a market like 2022 and you lose 20% of your portfolio, that's $160,000 poof gone. And then on top of that, you pull out another 72 because that's your lifestyle. Now you're at what, minus 230-ish? I don't know. I'm doing math in my head. That's always dangerous for me when I'm doing it live. But now, instead of $800,000 in that account, I have what, 570,000? That's totally different. And so then let's say the market comes back over the course of the next year, which is what usually happens after major downturns. Right. But the problem is that is recovering. You're withdrawing that recovery. Your portfolio can't get whole again. So if you have some losses back to back, either a really serious loss or a couple of smaller losses, you can't get back to whole again. And so that linear math that we did at the 8 doesn't work anymore because you took a loss in 1 year. And so the problem is when you start looking at the fact that you lose money and you have to earn more just to get back to even with the drag of your withdrawal. Now you have to earn substantially more. It's not sustainable over time, and it's a problem that people ignore when they're just doing math with constant returns. But in the real world, we have fluctuations.
Well, and one of the things that I keep thinking through is not only do you not get to predict what the market is going to do, but I've noticed something without having to do any research at all is that every year somebody's retiring. Every year, huge swaths of people are retiring. There's a lot of people that retired in 2020, the very beginning of 2020, January of 2020. They're like, I'm out. This is my year. I'm done. And that was a really weird year. I don't know if you knew that. And then, 21 was a little better. And then 22 came along. That was a terrifying year. Well, a lot of people retired in December of 2021, expecting the next year to be normal-ish, better than normal, average. It was a negative 16% in the bond market, negative 20 or 30 in the equity market, depending on which indexes you're looking
Right
at.
off the bat.
Right off the bat. And so I think there's that idea of the 0 and the 100% of it. It's like, no, that won't happen to me. That's some other person.
Right.
It's like, well, there's a lot of other people there's also a lot of people that retired in 1990 and had 10 years of the best decade in the S&P 500. They guessed right.
You just don't know what you're going to get.
Correct.
It could be great, might not be, might be totally awful, but you have to be prepared either way. Your strategy has to work either way. So if you're doing things the conventional way, I mean, you can do a quick Google search. I actually had somebody do this today while I was on a call with them. I said, do you have your phone out? And she was like, no, I'm paying attention to you. And I was like, okay, well, could you just put your phone in front of you and do something for me on Google real quick? So she dug in her purse, got her phone out. And I said, just ask Google, what is a safe withdrawal rate in retirement? And the very first thing that came up said 4%. And the 4% rule, we talk about a fair amount because it's conventional wisdom. It's what everybody talks about. So at a 4% withdrawal rate over a 35-year time period, same 50-50 portfolio with everything that we just talked about, your success rate is 75%, but that means your failure rate is still 25%. That's 1 in 4 market scenarios could lead to failure. And that is when you do a quick search of what can I safely do, that's what you're looking at. So at a 4% withdrawal rate, how much money would you need?
You need about $1.8 million to generate the same $72,000, $73,000 in income.
So if we do some quick math, if I take 1.8 million and I divide it by 72, what do I end up with?
Let's do some quick math. Hang on, I've got my calculator
I think you
in front
told
of me.
me earlier it was about
It's 25. Yeah.
25? Yeah. Here's what's crazy to me is that I have to have $1.8 million in the market. And that would last me 25 years if it was just sitting in cash and I was spending it down with no return at $72,000 a year, not giving myself raises. But when I give myself that 3% raise and I randomize what could happen to me based on what has happened in the market before, 1 out of 4 scenarios lead to me going broke during my 35-year lifetime, right? That retirement. So I'm like 10 years short to begin with if I want it to get all the way there. But the failure rate is still really high. I like spending money, but I'm also risk averse and I don't want to be a burden to my children. So what can I actually safely spend if I do it the conventional way?
Yeah, then you're really at 3%. And so if you do 3% on 1.8, wait for it, about 54 grand a year. It's a $20,000 pay cut, basically.
Yeah, I don't want that. So how much money do I need to have if I want to still spend the 72 plus my social so I stay at that 100,000 mark?
You're at $2.4 million is what you need. So
that's 3 times more money than 800,000.
They're off by just a smidge.
That's orders of magnitude more money that I have to save up in order to do this safely.
Yeah. It's $600,000 more. If you think about that, I mean, it's a 25% error rate, even against the 4%. It's 25% more money that you've got to save against the 4% rate and double 3x what you'd need on the regular advice of 8x.
This is the thing. Like, I know there are people listening to this right now that are like, that's outrageous. You don't need that much money, right? Because 2.4 million divided by the 72,000. What's that? Wait for it.
Wait for it.
Right
My
now.
computer is running slow. 33 years.
33 years. So
if you just had it in cash.
If you just had it in cash, ladies and gentlemen, This is fascinating to me that when you run all the statistics and the odds of a 50-50 portfolio and paying a manager to manage everything through here, that the results are almost the same. Now, here's what's not being said. This is positive portfolio balances as close to 100% of the time as we can get. So let's call it 95 to 99% of the time in most of these types of scenarios. The balance is probably not zero. If you're succeeding 90+% of the time, your portfolio is probably at the very least being preserved, if not growing, versus in cash, you're depleting it. So that is a main difference.
Correct.
But it is still math that is almost impossible to do, and it is a lot of work to get to a smaller amount of money in terms of the income it's actually producing. Like, I have to have an astronomical amount of money in my account to produce a relatively small amount every year, because I have to be so conservative because I can't afford to run out of money. There's got to be a better solution. I mean, asterisks right here. That's why you're listening. Right?
But I think that's the challenge, right? If I'm looking through the lens as an advisor, we get paid to manage money. And the more money that we manage, the more money we get paid. And so all of my advice, if I'm not looking through the right lens, comes from, you need bigger pockets of cash. Let's invest more money. Let's make it bigger. Let's make it bigger and bigger as we can. And I'm trying to keep you as a client. So if I told you that you need 33 times your income in order to retire, you would throw up all over my desk and you would leave. Like, you just wouldn't believe it. That can't be the right number, because the other guy says all he need is 8x.
Because it's so inefficient.
Correct. And that's the problem.
Because immediately, if you said those words, the person sitting across the table from you would say, I want a second opinion. And newsflash, you should.
Right. But the guy saying all you need is 8x, it's like, okay, well, that's achievable. Let's do that. Right? It's like, okay, well, that's X $100 a month that I need to save. I can do that. That's doable. The problem is you don't find out that there's a problem until it's too late.
And by that point, that advisor's retired and it doesn't matter anymore.
Correct. Right. I don't know. That was somebody else that did that. It wasn't me. So if you think through this idea of, how do I focus on ideal rates of income? How do I maximize my income in the most efficient way possible? Then I start looking for other solutions that allow me to get more income more efficiently. Because if we could just save millions of dollars a year, this wouldn't be a problem. But this couple that we're talking about is making $100,000. They probably don't, after taxes and 401k contributions of some level and kids and soccer classes and all the rest of the stuff, they don't have the ability to save $200,000 or $300,000 a year to make it all work.
Even if they did. Talk about somebody who's making $1 million a year. The people I talk to making $1 million a year don't want to have to save 300 of that a year.
No. They have $1 million problems
because they feel like they're working hard and they deserve it.
Right.
So, okay. So let's talk about a better way to do this. So we talk a lot about income easy button. We talk about how you can create a simulated pension. We talk about how you can create a buffer against volatility. Can I just straight bullet point, here's an answer, and then there's so much work that goes into how you structure all of this and what you do. But I'm actually going to use the Ernst & Young study as the sort of example here. Ernst & Young did a study also in 2022, in 21 or 22, one of those.
End of 21, beginning of 22.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they put out a study that looked at investments only, buying term insurance and investing the rest of what you have to save, and then self-insuring at retirement. And then they looked at permanent life insurance with investments together, and then permanent life insurance, deferred income annuities, and investments all together. And the two that had life insurance components outperformed the two that did not.
Substantially.
In 90% of possible market scenarios, including people who were chasing higher yields. So that to me is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, you have a multinational, multi-billion-dollar company doing research into investment strategies and the impact they have on everyday human beings. They have no financial products to sell you. Underline, bold, italics. So to me, this is much more objective than studies that get put out by financial institutions, which is most of what you find when you start Googling. So
Right.
what I think is interesting is pretty conclusively, if somewhere between 20 to 35% of your total net worth is sitting in the cash value of a permanent life insurance contract, and we like whole life insurance for this purpose because of the guarantees in it,
Right.
then you can be very aggressive with the other 70-ish percent of your portfolio because you've stabilized what's happening with an uncorrelated asset that gives you a permission slip to go aggressive with everything else and to withdraw more aggressively from everything else because you can stop withdrawing if the market takes a loss because you have an alternate source of income.
Right. And instead of getting that 3%, because you can be more aggressive, instead of that 3% really, really conservative, or even the 4% slightly less conservative, you can go as high as 7 or 8% from a distribution standpoint, from pulling from that account. And you have the exact same likelihood of success as if you're pulling at 3 because you have the safety valve.
So to get to essentially the same place, if you were using a strategy that believes in true diversification, not just diversifying inside of an investment portfolio, but diversifying outside of it into other completely different asset categories. In order to get to roughly the same type of income, you need about $1 million sitting in invested assets, and you need close to 300,000 to 400,000 sitting in the cash value of an insurance contract. So now we're at 1.3 million.
Yep.
To
1.3.
get to
Yep.
the same income level that you could get to at somewhere between 1.8 and 2.4, just depending on how aggressive you feel comfortable being. 1.3 versus 2.4. So the real answer is about 13 to 14 times income if your strategy for distribution is spot on.
Correct. You can be really dumb, and then it has to be a lot higher, like 33 times your income, but 8 is right out.
Strategic and thinking outside the box, and you can get where you need to be with about 13 to 14 times your income. But 8, hard pass.
8 is right out. Yeah. It's
all right. If you've enjoyed today, please keep listening. Tell your friends about us. DM us. If you're not so sure, feel free to troll us. All feedback is an opportunity for us to learn. We're talking about the Daily Stoics, the Ryan Holiday book earlier today. And today the obstacle was the way. So if you feel like throwing obstacles at us, we will find a way anyway.
That's right.
Thank you so much for joining us. You can find me at The Wealth Woman, wherever you use social media. Eric, what about you?
And you can find me at Acorn Grove, wherever you use social media. Thanks.
We'll see you next time. Specific financial concepts and advanced strategies are presented to you for educational purposes only. We cannot and do not guarantee their applicability to your individual circumstance. We encourage you to seek personalized advice from qualified professionals on all financial matters.
Provided content is for overview and is not intended and should not be relied upon as individualized tax, legal, fiduciary, or investment advice. Neither Wealth Woman, Acorn Grove, or the Wealth and Income Podcast, nor their representatives provide tax or legal advice. For answers to specific questions and before making any decision, please consult a qualified attorney or tax advisors.
All numeric examples and any individual shown are hypothetical and were used for explanatory purposes only. Actual results may vary.
Investing involves risk, which includes potential loss of principal. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Guarantees are subject to the claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company.
Life insurance should be purchased by individuals that have a need to provide a death benefit to protect others with insurable interests in their lives against financial loss. Life insurance is not a retirement plan, investment, or savings account.
Not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or any governmental agency. Insurance and investment products, not a deposit, not FDIC or NCUA insured, not insured by any federal government agency, not guaranteed by any bank or credit union, may lose value.
Please visit the Wealth Woman website disclosure page for other important disclosures.